So a lot of new things happening. This is a brand new year. I think that God's got some great things in store for us. Does anybody in here, anybody doing New Year's resolutions? I don't do them anymore, but is anybody? You don't have to put yourself out there, but usually it has to do with food or, diet and exercise, those types of things. Spend less time on Facebook. But we're going to help you because starting today, no more donuts downstairs. So, no, it was just today. But next week we'll have something down there. But from now on, it's just going to be like fruit and some keto stuff. You know what I mean? Like the whole church is doing keto this year. So I'm letting you know now. Anyways, no, we'll have donuts next week. I know some of you guys get hangry when you haven't had your donuts. So, but yeah, I'm excited. Next week is our church is 9 years old, starting next week. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. So we got the kids in here. Did you give the kids any candy? I was passing out cookies a minute ago to some of the kids. But so with all the kids in here, I'm going to make this pretty short. This is going to be, I say it relatively short for what my sermons normally are. So we're in this series on the book of Isaiah, and I was going to tell you about some of the things that we have coming up. A lot of you guys know, most of you know, we're starting a recovery house March 1st, and we're super excited about that. And then, and we'll talk about a lot of this stuff next week when we do the recap over the last 9 years and what's to come. But this Easter, we're going to do one service. We're going to do one Easter service in Buckner. Just as an outreach for the people out that way, and we'll give you more details about that, but we're excited about that, so it's going to be great. All right, so if you got a Bible, take and turn to Isaiah 43, okay? We're in Isaiah 43, and I'm going to back up from what I read a little bit ago, and Isaiah was one of the major prophets. He wrote the book of Isaiah, and it was named after him, right? And remember, a few months ago, when I started the book of Isaiah, the series, I told you how he died. Does anybody remember how he died? Nobody? I'm glad you guys pay attention. All right. This was only a couple months ago. Isaiah was, this is not ringing a bell. Isaiah was, the king had him stuffed into a log because he was preaching against the king, and the king didn't like what he was saying. So he had him stuffed into a hollow log. This isn't ringing a bell at all. None of you guys know anything. It's the first I'm hearing of this. They stuffed him into a hollow log, and then they did what? They sawed it in half. They cut it in half. That's how he died. So, anyways, I think it'd be a great way to go, to be honest with you. But anyway, so let's get into this. Isaiah 43, back to verse 14. So here's what it says. It says, "This is what the Lord says, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel." He says, "For your sake, I will send an army against Babylon, forcing the Babylonians to flee in those ships as the ships they are so proud of." So the word in that verse that stuck out to me was Redeemer. And I was studying for this. I was just looking at, I know I've heard this my whole life. I was like, what? When I do this, I always try to come up with, I wonder if I could come up with the definition of Redeemer. And so I actually went online and I just Googled Redeemer definition to see what the internet says. And look what it says. Redeemer, here's the definition. It says, a person who redeems. That is brilliant. And I've heard that and I was like, thank you. That is so helpful. If I only knew what the word redeems means, you know what I mean? I know it's a common word, but I'm just like, who does this? They paid somebody to write this, right? A lot of money. Anyways, so a lot of you guys know what it means to redeem something, right? Some of you guys redeem points on your credit card. You redeem coupons. What else? What else do you redeem? Nothing? Huh? Okay. And then in the Bible, there's some times where the Redeemer is mentioned in the book of Job. Remember, if you read the book of Job, he talks about this. This is what Job said. Job was covered in head to toe with boils, and he lost everything. And he sat there around the campfire scraping the boils off with pieces of broken pottery. And he says, "But as for me," he goes, "I know that my Redeemer lives." That was his definition of God, his analogy of God was he's my Redeemer. He goes, I know that my Redeemer lives, and he will stand upon the earth at the last, and after my body has decayed, yet in my body I will see him. And then there's a great song by Nicole C. Mullins. You guys remember that, where my Redeemer lives? It's one of my favorite songs. I love that. And then there's a story in the Old Testament in the book of Ruth about Boaz. Remember what his nickname was? He was the kinsman redeemer because he was her nearest relative, and they were from Arkansas, so relatives married back then. But anyways, they just, sorry. But he was her nearest relative. They were unrelated, but he was like the person. So there was a thing in the Old Testament that says, like, so her husband died, and so this guy was going to take her in, and Boaz was called the kinsman redeemer, and which is an analogy for Jesus, right? Because Jesus is our redeemer. Jesus is the one who purchased my soul. He has redeemed my soul. Like, I am redeemed because of what Jesus has done, because I have a relationship with him, right? And so let's go on. I love that word redeemer. That's God. And verse 15, he says, I am the Lord, your Holy One, Israel's creator and king. He says, I am the Lord, I am the Lord who opened a way through the waters, making a dry path on the sea. So he's recounting what he did for Israel. He's going, because you know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of you guys are here, and God has done so much. Every person in this room, if you think about it, God has been so good to you. He has rescued you time and time and time again, but you have a short memory, and so do I. We forget, because next time we get with our back up against the wall, we're like, oh, it's over now. And God's like, really? You said that the last time, and you said that the time before that, and I've never failed you. But he's recounting for them about the time that they came out of Egypt. And remember that story? The whole, like 1.5 million people, maybe 2 million Israelites, Pharaoh was chasing them, and they got to the water's edge, and it was the Red Sea, and they were like, we're doomed now. And God goes, watch this. And Moses held up the staff, and what happened? It parted. A supernatural thing happened. A miracle happened. And they all walked through on dry ground. That's how God takes care of his people. And then after this is the part that I like, is after they got through to the other side, he closed it up, but not until Pharaoh and his army came through there, and he closed it up on their enemies and wiped them out, killed them. I like that part. I don't know. Does that make me sick? I like that part about it, you know. That's like the best part about it. So he's recounting that. He goes, don't forget about what I've done. He goes, I made you walk through on dry ground in the sea. Verse 17, he says, I called forth a mighty army of Egypt and all of its chariots and horses. I drew them beneath the waves, and they drowned in their lives snuffed out like a smoldering candle wick. So I love how God operates. And again, I'll just touch on that just for a second, that I like the fact that God says, if you stick close to me, I will take care of your enemies. And that's not a direct quote from the Bible, but you get that. God says, I will take care. Matter of fact, what God does say is he says, vengeance is mine. I sometimes don't like that. You know what? God says over and over again in the Bible, vengeance is mine. He says, I will repay, says the Lord. In other words, you don't take vengeance. People are going to mess you over. You're going to get hurt. Somebody's going to steal from you. Somebody's going to abuse you. And God says, you leave the vengeance up to me. Right? Why? Because vengeance will eat you up from the inside out. It just will. Bitterness, all of that stuff is not healthy for us. Everyone in this room is going to be abused by somebody else. They're going to take advantage of you, and your instinct is to get them back, because that's what the world says. That's our natural tendency. But God says, no, don't do that. Let me handle that. Now the problem with that, the reason why I don't like that sometimes, because God doesn't handle it the way I want him to handle it. I want him to drown the Egyptians, and he's like. Sometimes God says, well, I want to show them mercy. No, don't show them mercy. They didn't show me mercy. You know what I mean? And God's like, well, I showed you mercy, right? Over and over and over again. So you guys are all looking at me like you've never experienced this before, but maybe you don't have enemies, but I'm just telling you, like, there's been times I've had to give something over to God, and I'm like, get him. And God's like, I don't want to get him. I want to show mercy. I'm like, I don't want you to show mercy. Anyways, I want God to show me mercy. I just don't want my enemies to be shown mercy. I'm just being honest with you, but he does that. And anyways, I'm glad for that. It reminds me of, there's a story, and I'm almost done. I really am. There's a story, relatively speaking. There's a story in the New Testament. There's a story in the New Testament about the disciples and Jesus. One day, and I don't even remember the context, but some Pharisees, I think, or some people were giving Jesus a hard time. And the disciples went over to Jesus and they said, Jesus, you want us to call fire down from heaven and kill them all and destroy them all? And Jesus just looked at him like, you're an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, just stop. You know what I mean? He's just shaking his head going, I can't believe I have to deal with you every single day. But they wanted to call fire down. You know where they got that from? Because that happened in the Old Testament. The king sent 50 people to go arrest Elijah, and Elijah called down fire from heaven and burned all of them up. The king sent 50 more people, and he called fire down from heaven and burned them up. And then the next group came and sent 50 more, and the guy walked up to him. He was like, hey, please don't burn us up. I'm just doing my job. And so he went with them and went and talked to the king. But the disciples looked at that and was like, that seems like a legitimate thing to do. Let's burn people up. And I'll be honest with you, I like it, but I don't think God's going to let me. If God answered my prayers and burned up, some of you wouldn't be here. I'm just being honest with you. This whole front row would be gone. I'm joking about that. Just these two. No, I'm joking. I'm just kidding. No, but that's the lesson that we got to learn, is that a lot of times God just wants to show mercy to people, and that's okay. So let's go back to this. Verse 18, this is the thing, and I'm almost done. It says, he goes, but forget all that. All the stuff I did in the Old Testament, Egypt and all of that, he goes, forget all that. It's nothing compared to what I'm going to do, for I am about to do something new. See, I have already begun. He goes, do you not see it? He goes, I will make a pathway through the wilderness, and I will create rivers in the dry wasteland. Just the context of that, the children of Israel were living in Babylonian captivity for 70 years at this time, and he was just letting them know that, yes, it's rough right now. I've blessed you before, and I'm about to do it again. I'm going to take care of you guys. I'm always going to take care of you guys, but sometimes you have to go through a time of testing. And I was just thinking this morning, I was just talking to God this morning, and I was just thinking about all of the stuff that I've been through. And if I hadn't have gone through that stuff, I wouldn't be the person I am today. And you too. The trials in your life are what make you stronger. Now, if we could push a button and erase all of our problems, every one of us would. But God's like, no, you're never going to grow if I don't send you problems. If you're never going to become the person I want until you learn. Like, instead of getting rid of the person at your work that gets on your last nerve, God says, learn how to deal with them the way I deal with you. And those are hard lessons to learn. I'm just telling you. So let me talk just a little snippet right here. I wrote down some stuff, some keys, because this is a new year, and a lot of you guys are setting resolutions or you want to accomplish some goals. So I thought about this, and I'll just do this, and then I want to end out with just some prayer. So if you want to accomplish your goals, you need to, number one, be intentional. There's intentionality involved, okay? So in other words, it goes like this. And me and Chuck and Jeff in Recovery Group, we talk about this stuff all the time. Like, I could give you analogies all day long. If you're a person and you say, this year I want to stop drinking, I want to quit doing drugs, I want to change my life, then I would look at your life and I'm like, okay, if that is your goal, then why do you keep hanging out at the bar? You know what I mean? If you want to quit drinking, why do you, if you want to lose weight this year, why do you keep buying Twinkies and Ho-Hos? You know what I mean? Like, that's how I look at life. I'm like, if your goal is this, whatever it is, and I'm like, okay, back up. If you say this is your goal, then why do you keep doing this? If you say this year I want to spend more time with my family, or I want to get healthy, or I'm like, then why are you spending so much time on the couch watching Netflix? You know, like, you have to look at the things and just be really honest and go, if this is my goal, why am I spending all my time doing this? You have to adjust what you do with your time, and that leads me to the next one, is priorities. Is prioritization, if I could say that. And I had this analogy I was going to, I had Remo Ann go out and buy me some stuff this week, and she's going to be mad because I'm not even really going to use it. Because I just couldn't figure it. But have you ever seen the demonstration? You've probably seen it in school where, and it goes, a lot of you seen it, a lot of you haven't, but it goes back to there was a professor one time came in with a jar like this, and he put some big rocks in it, and he goes, is this full? And the class goes, yeah, it's full. And then he reached down and took a bunch of pebbles, and he poured the pebbles in, and they all settled in around it. And he goes, now is this full? And they all said, yeah, it's full. And he goes, what about now? And he took out some sand, and he filled it up with sand, and it all settled in there. And they all said, he goes, is it full now? And they were like, yeah, I think so. And you can even dump some water in there, right? And it can still take more. But the purpose of the whole thing was, he goes, if you take all of this out, and again, I'm not going to do it because I just don't have time, and I don't want to make a mess. But if I took all of this out and I put the sand in first, and then I put the pebbles on top with like 2 layers, and then I tried to put the big rocks in, it wouldn't all fit. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you have to do it in that. You have to put the big rocks in first, and what it is the big rocks represent the big things in your life, the things that you really need to focus on: church, your relationship with God, your family, right? The things that really matter. The pebbles are other things like your career, your hobbies, your interests, other things like that. But the sand represents all of the frivolous things that you could really do without. So you put the big stuff in first. You make sure that you have room for that. And then you put the pebbles in, right, next. And then if there's any room left, then you give it to that. But all too often, people have their lives inverted in that they spend all of their time doing stuff that's frivolous, that doesn't really matter in eternity, and then they wonder, wow, why don't I have time to read my Bible today? I'm like, you could read one verse today. Don't tell me you don't have time for it. You just are not making time for that. You're not prioritizing it. You're not being intentional. Everything good in life, I'm just telling you, you study successful leaders, you study anybody successful in any walk of life, I promise you they're intentional about everything they do. They're intentional about what they put in their mouth. They're intentional about how they spend their time. They're intentional about what they spend their money on. You have to be intentional, and you have to prioritize, or else you're never going to accomplish your goals. Number 3 is you got to be flexible, because, right, you come up with a plan, and you got to change. Who was it? Mike Tyson that said everybody has a plan when starting a fight until you get punched in the mouth, and then you got to reroute, right? You ever been in the GPS and she's like rerouting, and I'm like, shut up, you're driving me crazy. Anyways, so the last one is accountability. Or number 3. Did I give you number 3? Flexibility, and then number 4 is accountability. And all I'll say about that is a lot of times if you want to do something this year with your life, something significant, you have to be accountable. You have to put it out there. You know, like you can't keep just talking about, hey, one of these years I'm going to do this. No, you need to put it down on paper, and you need to tell somebody about it and say, I'm going to do this. I need you to help hold me accountable. There's this great story about JFK. So John F. Kennedy, his grandfather grew up in England. And when he was a little boy, he told him the story. He goes, when I was a little boy, we used to walk to school and from home from school every day. And him and his friends would walk together, and they would come by this big cobblestone wall. And him and his friends always wanted to climb that. And they would stand there looking at this tall wall going, man, one of these days we're going to climb that. And so one day they stopped right there, and one of his friends grabbed the hat off of JFK's grandfather. He was a little kid. He grabbed his hat, and he threw it over the wall. And he goes, now go get your hat. And he climbed that wall, and something happened. All of the other boys climbed it, and then from there on, it was so easy to climb that wall. And every time they got to the wall, somebody yelled out, throw the hat over the wall. And that's all it took, was to have that a little bit of accountability. And I'm just telling you, you have to get some accountability in your life. So let's do this. I'm going to bring this to a close. Let's all just bow our heads and close our eyes. And my favorite thing about the passage that I read is God says, I'm doing a new thing. Now, there's people in this room, probably every person in this room, if you're thinking about it, there's some things about 2022. I mean, it wasn't all bad in your life. Some of you had a rough year. Some of you had a great year. It wasn't all good this year, but it wasn't all bad. And what I like to do is I choose to focus on the positives. We did this in recovery group last week, and we were like, we're going to focus on all of the great things that happen and try not to, I'm not pretending that bad things didn't happen. I'm not pretending that I didn't have failures this year. But why dwell on that? Let's move into 2023. It's here. And God's like, I've got some new things for you to do. I do. God's like, I got so many plans for you. If I were to show you, it'd blow your mind. And it's up to you to stick close to God. If you stick close with God, if you stick with Him this year, He's going to do some incredible things. You're going to have some failures this year. All right? You will. You're going to have some things that are regrettable. You're going to get to the end of this year and go, yeah, there's a few things I want to leave in 2023. But move into 2024 with hope, with renewed vision. And God wants us to wake up every day. He wants us to pop out of bed and go, it's a brand new day. God woke me up. He gave me breath in my lungs. And it's a great day. It is.